eventually also risking themselves to help the migrant to come across to the U.S. So I'm just wondering that, yes, they are obviously against this kind of like sentiment, but I also wonder that how many of them are doing just trying to like piss off Trump administration. How many of them are actually genuinely to help the migrants to come into U.S. Or maybe the another question is that how is this movement have any possibility can we go more bigger than actually can how to say to destabilize the rhetoric of Trump administration that is obviously xenophobia. It's just like sharing up.
No, but that's a really relevant, useful comments and questions, all of them. I think when it comes to the question of neoliberalism, what I was trying to argue, in a way, you answered your own first question, I think, insofar as one analysis of Trump, which actually ends up with the back to the working class Bernie Sanders stance. One answer or one reading of Trump's presidency would be Trump is a symptom of neoliberalism. So the neoliberal globalization equaled deindustrialization and the giving up of the U.S. working class. So the problem of Trump is a problem of neoliberalism, and that's why I'm trying to do the Ernst Mandel thing, because that's too short an analysis. So that's why I want to I mean, this has to be connected to the question of racism in the U.S. and it has to be connected to the question of capital, and so that's the reading of. I'm just throwing out names, but Melanie Klein or Naomi Klein or Melanie Klein. That would be impressive. Naomi Klein or
different.
It's all good people. Yeah.
Up there.
Naomi Klein, but also someone like even Nancy Fraser. They have kind of like they've made analysis where they say this is in a way Trump is the bastard son of Reagan and the Clinton family. So what we have to do is we have to get back to kind of like post-World War II American welfare society. That's the project and that's the analysis, and that's what I'm trying to counter. So I hopefully have not argued that the problem is neoliberalism. Of course, that's why I say that Trump is, in a certain sense, the realization that the economy has been running on empty for a long period, but that the economy, I mean, that this has to do with structural constraints or kind of like the contradictions of capitalism. And that's why I try to argue that there's no, as you said yourself, there's no normality. So there's nothing to go back to. That's why I'm using Robert Brenner or Arrighi or kind of like parts of the German Wertkritik, value criticism or value critique, Robert Kurz, this very particular kind of Marx reading that began in the 70s, which very much has to do with kind of like the inherent crisis tendencies of capitalism. But that's why I'm trying to use them in order to prevent this too short analysis of Trump that ends up in a kind of reformist kind of like nationalization of the working class government. And of course, I mean, you know much more than I do about the face or character or of neoliberalism in many other contexts. Of course, I'm talking about neoliberalism in the U.S. context and Western Europe. Kind of like the way neoliberalism also, of course, underwent a significant change from the 80s to the 90s. I mean, that's why it's important to go back to Stuart Hall's analysis of Thatcher, the hard road to renewal in mid-80s, where he tried to, there's also problems with that analysis, but he tried to map the creation of what he termed moral panic in Britain in the early 70s, where there was this so-called mobbing crisis, where all of a sudden British papers started talking about this threat of people getting mocked, and of course there was an explicit racialization to this mocking thing going on. So he talks about the way Thatcher was able to both on the one hand cut down on social benefits and welfare, and then kind of like hollowing out the state, which meant that of course it was necessary to further fund the police because people were getting afraid, and there's crime and black people are being criminal and stuff like that. So kind of like this thing that authoritarian neoliberalism, I mean, was already characterized by parts of what is Trump's program. So law and order and some kind of racial exclusion was actually already there, according to Hall in the 80s. But neoliberalism in the US, in the West, in the 90s, of course, became Tony Blair and Clinton, and kind of like neoliberalism was this super cool creative class, creative capital phase where the kind of like the multicultural neoliberalism, which was in a way what someone like Hillary Clinton was still campaigning on when she lost the election to Trump. So this was kind of like this would be the superstructure to the neoliberal economic policy program, and the changes that kind of like the superstructural changes to neoliberalism in the West, going from the 80s to the 90s. But and it's probably, I mean, as you explained it, that the kind of like the critical superstructure to neoliberalism was seldom put in place when structural adjustment programs were introduced in Malaysia or other places. So we have to be careful when we put these concepts into use, or be specific when we talk about them. I think that point. I'm not trying to argue that activism is completely irrelevant or useless in any way whatsoever. That's I mean, that's not my point. And of course, it's extremely important that people are trying to prevent immigrants from being rejected from Denmark, or trying to I mean, I'm engaged in that myself in Denmark, but and it's extremely important what people are doing to the US-Mexican border. But I think that this is again coming back to the 72 thing. It's me trying to somehow to. This has to do with the concept of totality. This has to do with kind of like the splintering of left-wing militancy that somehow occurred in, I don't know when, but during the 60s or 70s or whatever. This is like the thing, the problematic side to what I call identity politics, that activism or militancy has tended to become focused on single issue matters. And of course, I mean, I know why, and I can understand why, and I can understand it's necessary to critique kind of like the Marxism, but I also think there's a problem there. There's a challenge. There's a challenge theoretically, analytically, and there's also a challenge kind of like in the streets. How do we align the different fights and struggles against different forms of domination, and I think concepts like racial capitalism or trying to put part of this Western, kind of like the more expanded vocabulary of Western Marxism to use. I mean, that's an attempt to try to bring these different analysis of different forms of domination, but also different fights or struggles against these forms of domination or control. Try to bring them together somehow. I think that would be. That's what I'm attempting to do somehow.
Thank you.
I would like to raise another question. If you have no question, no. So communism from the angle of Hong Kong, it's okay for you?
There's no communism anymore. Regime day alone.
Oh, okay.
Because I think, as you say, the neoliberalism keep attacking the working class for, I think, since 1917 for about 30 or 40 years. But at the same time, I know that because I think after 1970, what the United States has run the Keynes model, the incoming expenditure model for start to be more function at the time. So they cannot expand their public investment and hire more workers for that. And so if that is a cause for them turning to a neoliberalism to start to and then after these 30 years and then Trump started to bring back again that kind of increasing the domestic demands and so to raise more domestic nationalized worker, then what is the process of making this choice? And when the Keynes model starts to become a function, because I think right now in Taiwan we are on the way. We are still on the way. We are now like these 5 years. These 5 years, a new grand project for domestic investment for and infrastructural investment. I think maybe that it works in a Keynes model, and as we learn from history, it will quickly to become malfunction readily. And so here in Taiwan, I think we are working on the way to the 30 years of neoliberalism that you mentioned. I think we are heading there. Yes, because it's getting harder and harder for this kind of investment. Yes.
Yeah, and also the two candidates for the presidential election. One said that I can be successful because I want to follow Trump's model.
Yes.
And the other one said that everyone wants to go rich, and everyone can show that we can use our concentration and everyone can feel happy. Oh, it's terrible.
And another thing,
maybe
meditation. One more thing is that
meditation. No, it's a strong penetrating thought. So yeah, right. Yeah.
Our current the grand project, because recently I noticed that the current grant projects for domestic structuring, it doesn't include in the infrastructural building. It also has its part of cultural productions investment. So I think it's exactly the model that the multicultural neoliberalism shows. And also there's the candidates, as Professor Liu say, that are waiting for being next Trump. So I think this is why I asked that if there's no alternatives, then of course it would be it's our destination here.
Yeah, no, but that's also a good question, and I don't know about the political economic situation in Taiwan, but I think that I mean, I don't know whether we have to resurrect Trotsky, but this is, of course, this is the uneven combined development of capitalism. That for the last 40 years, the so-called advanced economies, U.S., Western Europe, they've been shrinking. But in the last 20, 30 years, Iran, China, etc. There's been a tremendous amount of development. But the point would be from someone like Trotsky or from someone like the Italian communist like Amadeo Bodiga that capitalism is development, but it's also underdevelopment, and it's development in specific areas. So it's limited conjunctural development followed by an enormous amount of underdevelopment. And that's what we see as spreading across the globe in different ways. And the situation in the difficulty in it seems to be that in a certain sense the potential of the potential here would, as it seems as if there is nothing similar to although people are setting up a party and doing stuff, there's no working class movement as far as I understand from talking to people in Taiwan. So and I kind of like the post-World War II welfare society in Western Europe and US was created on the basis of the threat of some kind of revolutionary upheaval, and the welfare society was like a compromise, and an attempt to, after the First and Second World War, where the proletarians of the nations in Europe had massacred each other, it was like a compromise between capital and labor. But it seems as if there's no coherent, strong working class movement able somehow to pressure or put pressure on these competing, extreme neoliberal politicians who, for some reason, seem to incarnate a kind of extreme neoliberal individualization, where it's just a question of you can get rich. Of course, we all have to. Not specifying that this means that we can probably not all of us get rich, but insofar as there's a possibility that you can get rich, and that you can get rich to the detriment or on the cost of other people not getting rich, that would of course be kind of like, that would be the analysis of the working class movement would their analysis would of course be that this is not the way to go forward. We of course have to, the notion of solidarity, but I don't know whether the notion of solidarity, what solidarity means in a Taiwanese context, if it exists as a political concept, because that was the most important concept
in the family.
Yeah.
In the family.
No. I have a few different views. That
Yeah.
is, in Taiwan there are labor union, but there are
Yeah.
also migrant labor union.
Yeah.
Then there are strikes, there are
Yeah.
protests. And also there are solidarity. For example, the gay movement,
Mhm.
they just changed the law.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also this, of course, will solicit very massive reaction from citizens
Mhm.
on the other side, right? In the
Yeah.
name of protecting the family.
Yeah.
But again, they are a very massive linking from north to south to show their support for
Yeah.
this same-sex marriage. So it's not only working class resistance, but and also proletariat is not only those laborers in the factories.
Of course not.
It's right. So there, it has to be a more global resistance, citizens' resistance on different issues. So it has to be shown through the elections, the resistance, and through massive mass education on campus and outside of campus, in the streets, and through grassroots movement and everything. So that, for example, they have this Changers Co-op. I really hope that can continue. So it's not only Malaysian students, but also students from Indonesia, India, and China, and Hong Kong, and local students. They can collaborate together and try to educate and to keep record and to publish through zine and to circulate electronic publication very widely on different issues. So that is this change has to happen from every corner on different issues: food pollution, air pollution, water pollution, or this eviction of under urban renewal, or this whatever the woods that being cut and so on. So waiting for working class is postponing the transformation of society, and waiting for the capitalism to collapse. It's just very, very wishful thinking that would exist. So the penetration should start from all different corners.
No, I'm not arguing for. I mean, that would be my critique of the. I don't know, the Corbyn perspective. I'm not waiting for the. I'm not waiting for the working class. I mean, that's part of this. The expansion of Western Marxism is, of course, an expansion of the concept of the proletariat. If I were to make a Marxist class analysis in Denmark, the proletarians is not a retired pensionist whose dad worked in a factory. That's the Polish guy working in the fields collecting strawberry. So of course we have to come up with a completely new class analysis, and I mean so of course also include migrant workers, etc. But
also unemployed graduate students. I mean,
yeah.
sort of.
but I think that I mean it's a huge political problem that we don't have a rallying motto. I mean, the rallying motto used to be what are we supposed to do? What's the revolutionary call? That's socialized production. But that doesn't work anymore. It doesn't make sense. But we kind of like we're living in the breakdown of that program, and there are. I mean, and then I'm trying to reintroduce the notion of communism or revolutionary perspective, but I'm not able to account for what is. I mean, I can't really come up with a fitting slogan, but I think I think it's necessary to actually to advance in that way and try to connect all of the different struggles you talk about. Also because I think that in your response I detect belief in a political solution. I don't think there is a political solution to the problems we're talking about, and I don't think it's a question of hegemony or a question of communication that we can actually we can educate people to not be racist. I don't think that's the case. I think it's much more. It has to do with structural problems that go way beyond some kind of post-Habermasian idea of rationality or stuff like that. So that's why I think that the notion of of a public sphere, for instance, is it doesn't mean that I don't want to, that I don't do interviews and talk to people, but I'm not sure it's. I think it's a contaminated, occupied territory I intervene in, but and I think it's of really limited use. I don't think the most important battles will take place in that arena.
Yeah, I was just thinking, again, of course, when you said military combat to destroy the current capitalist regime, that wouldn't work. And when I was also thinking that it's very various, as you said, heterogeneous initiative from local society in different forms, theatrical, okay, artistic, curation, and whatever it is, in different community, different society. That is, the general public, they need to be empowered in the courage or the necessity of their voicing their disobedience or disagreement with the government, or with whatever central or local government, or whatever it is, this ideology that's being shared. So in gender issue, in this other issues, and so on. So that has to be taking place throughout, all over in the society, and things can be little bit that can be changed. Yeah.
Let's hope so.
Well, anyway.
Maybe we have to go to a conclusion.
Yeah.
I would like to maybe say something, and will tell me if you agree on that. Perhaps you might have the impression that when we talk on people like Trump in terms of fascism, post-fascism, we are making use of rhetorical effects, trying to dramatize things. But this is not the question. What is at the core, I would say, of fascism in this context? It's not the fact that these people, when they become statesmen, are brutal. Let's say make children die on the Mexican border, which is the case, of course. This is not the core. The problem, for me, the main problem is their complete indifference to the relation between language and truth. What I mean is very simple. When we talk together, and the condition for us to be able to talk together is that we talk in the horizon of truth. Even, and maybe in particular, when we laugh. Truth matters. We always take for granted that truth matters. And what they are destructing is this affinity between truth and language. For example, there are maybe two levels. First, total indifference to established facts. In the previous century, one of the main issues for that was historical facts, denial of historical facts. But you will notice that Trump doesn't say things like, we Americans have won the war in Vietnam, which would be the usual way, I mean the usual regime of historical revisionism. No, he says climate change, it doesn't exist. So this is not, that total indifference to, like that, it has displaced itself from historical issues to environmental issues. This is one thing. And the other level is the total indifference to coherence in, let's say, the chaining up of statements. That is, I say that today, and tomorrow I will say exactly the opposite. This is Trump. And doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. And it means one thing: the only link that matters is not the link between language and truth, it's the link between language and power. What I'm saying is, let's say, true, but in the post-truth realm, because I'm saying it. And I'm saying it as I am what I am, that is the President of the United States. So the only thing that